All right, guys, it's 3 o'clock on water day of no school November. To relieve my frustration, I just got out of the weight room trying to make myself huge like Noah. So this is a quick review. It's Greece and Rome. I'm going to try and go as fast as I can without losing you guys. So bear with me. It's not the full lecture. My God, that would take like 3 hours. So I'm going to try and keep this to 40, maybe 45 minutes. Ancient Greece, that we know, is made up of 3 different civilizations. The first of which being ancient Minoa on the island of Crete out in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, kind of equidistant between Greece and North Africa and modern-day Israel. It is the first group of people that will form what we know as the ancient Greek civilization. What we know comes from the giant palace of Knossos, and the Minoans were named for ancient King Minos, the mythological owner of the half-man, half-bull creature in the Theseus and the Minotaur parable we will talk about soon. One of the things that we know about ancient Minoan society comes from the beautiful decorative frescoes that are painted on the walls at Knossos. From them, we see scenes of daily life, like a high rate of rights and responsibilities for women, that they didn't have many natural defenses because they were traders and merchants, and young kids had to do a vault over a bull in order to be an adult in society. Second group are the ancient Mycenaeans, and they are famous for the Trojan War. And the city of Mycenae here will be founded on a mountaintop with its back to a cliff, with a very circuitous walkway to get into it in this funnel, which takes you into a narrower funnel. This right here, where the lion's mound is this right here. And then it narrows you down in further to get into the city gate. It was built for defense, as the Greeks were going to fight with each other constantly. The Mycenaeans will conquer the Minoans and have a very short-lived but powerful civilization that will last from about 1400 to 200 BC. And they are most famous for their involvement in the Trojan War, that is fought for the mythological, really cool reason that Queen Helen, the Queen of Sparta, left with the Trojan prince Paris and started the war. The most likely reason is that it was a trade war between 2 heavyweight empires, and the war will last 10 years until Odysseus comes up with the idea to hide soldiers in the wooden horse, be sacrificed to Poseidon. And when it is brought indoors as the Trojans celebrate, the Greek Spec Ops team comes out and the city is toppled. They are led by King Agamemnon, who will return home and be buried in this plot right here. His wife will kill him because to ensure victory, he sacrificed his daughter to that cause. We know of the Trojan War because this German guy, Heinrich Schliemann, in the 1870s became fascinated with the stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey. So he sold his interest in mining businesses, sailed around the Mediterranean, and proved that the stories were true. And he's the one who found Heinrich Schliemann's death mask right here. But as a miner, like a coal miner, he was not a trained archaeologist, and he did a lot more damage than he did good. Here we have a group that, while the Mycenaeans are gone fighting the Trojans, is the third group that will blend together to form what we know as ancient Greek civilization, which are the Mycenaeans. And the Mycenaeans were Indo-European invaders. Sort of like the same branch that went down into India, the Aryan migration across Asia. They are warlike, and they are tough, and they are violent. And they are significant for the simple fact that for the very first time in world history, that learning actually regresses. It goes backward. This is known as the European Dark Ages. But the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, and the Dorians are going to blend to form modern Greek civilization. They're going to worship the same gods. They're going to eat the same foods. They're going to speak the same language. But they are spread out due to their geography. And they're going to not be in contact with each other. So for about 500 years, Greece is in the Dark Ages until Homer, the blind poet, writes or is given credit for writing the Iliad and the Odyssey in 750. And Greece is made up of not only the mainland, but a bunch of small islands. And the geography is really intense. Mountain, valley, mountain, valley, mountain, and valley. So it was much easier for the Greeks to sail across the Aegean or the Mediterranean than to travel overland to meet each other. Again, I use the example of I-77 running through West Virginia as kind of like your barometer here. It's tough to get around. So the Greeks were traders. And sailing on the Aegean Sea, you're never out of sight of land for very long. So they're geographically isolated. So each city-state will govern itself independently, like a tiny little country. Its own leadership, its own laws, its own currency, its own way of doing things, like Chapel Hill, Carrboro, and Hillsborough. The two most famous of these city-states will be Athens and Sparta. And it's going to feature 3 levels. Up on top is the Acropolis that held the temple for the main god. Close to it is where the upper class lives, surrounded by a defensive wall. Below that is the marketplace, where everybody gathered to go to the market every day, the middle ground, and beneath that was the lower class. Now, since these city-states grew independent of each other, man, they couldn't stand each other. It was like Chapel Hill and East Chapel Hill, or Durham Academy, or Carrboro. They hated each other like your old school rival, Steve Kaczynski, and it led to frequent warfare. But the Greeks are going to sail all around the Mediterranean, trading, wine and olive oil and marble. And because of their geography, they had a very difficult time feeding themselves. So they're going to go off, they're going to move around the Mediterranean, they're going to meet other people, and they're eventually going to begin to colonize. So here again is the most famous Acropolis in Greece, the Acropolis of Athens, which will be destroyed several different times. An Acropolis simply means city on a hill. And every Acropolis, every city, had 3 or 4 different gateways into it. If you were attacked and invaded by outsiders, you had to get inside that first gate before they shut it, or you could not get in. So by 750, right about the time that Homer writes the Iliad and the Odyssey, the Greeks, especially in Athens, have outgrown their ability to feed themselves. So they begin to colonize around the Mediterranean, but close to Athens, over here on what is today the west coast of Turkey. Then it was known as Asia Minor, part of the Persian Empire. The city of Athens is going to set up shop, and it is going to cause a lot of problems here coming up. But the ancient Greek city-states are governed by one of 4 different types of government. Number 1 is a monarchy. And a monarchy simply means one person is in charge. But over time, aristocrats, large landowners, and powerful people are going to want access to the political system. So they will form an oligarchy, which is a government run by a rich and a powerful few. Not one. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10. It's not great, but it's more than one. After this, merchants and traders will begin to amass wealth. They will be vital to the interests of the city, and they will want political rule. So an aristocracy, a rule by the rich and the wealthy, it is at this time landowners, they will also want political power. So maybe it's like 20 to 50, it's not great, but it's more than one. And especially in Athens, Athens will be the first city-state in the world that has a true working democracy where the citizens will elect their leaders. And this slow road to democracy will begin in ancient Athens. We're going to have 4 tyrants. At this time it means something good, that are going to make reforms, that are going to help out the entire city. They're going to bring democracy to it. Number 1, we have Draco, as in Draco Malfoy. Draco made laws apply equally for all Roman citizens, both rich and poor. And this is extremely important because remember, citizenship in Athens is very, very, very highly prized. You have to be a natural-born male, native to Athens, that are both natural-born citizens. So the differentiating between rich and poor changes what Hammurabi does, and it makes it equal for everyone. A little while later, there's a guy named Solon. And what was happening in Athens was the practice of debt slavery. If you could not pay your debts, you could sell yourself into slavery until they were paid. But nefarious characters would find a way to trap you in perpetual debt slavery. Athenians were enslaving other Athenians. So Solon frees those in debt slavery. He takes the unused land from the aristocrats and he gives it to those who need it. He redistributes it to the people who absolutely need it, and he outlaws the future practice of debt slavery. Slowly but surely weakening the power of the aristocracy and giving power to the people. Now, even though Solon has done this, we still have a lot of Athenians who are out of a job. So Pisistratus will create what is known as public works projects, where we will put people who want to work. We will pay them out of the city treasury, but they are going to do things that help everybody. Build roads, aqueducts, irrigation canals, enlarge the city wall. They will feel good about themselves for doing all this. They will see progress and they are going to get paid. They will take that money that we have given them and they will redistribute it throughout the entire empire or city-state, and we'll make our money back. And last but not least is Cleisthenes. Tomorrow, voting day, why we're losing another day of school, Cleisthenes invented voting in districts, where everybody has the ability to have their voice heard. And he divided Athens up into 10 districts or neighborhoods, and 50 people from each district were elected to what is called the Council of 500. You served a 1-year term limit, and then you were done. You couldn't serve twice until everybody in your district had served. So think of your individual neighborhoods being a district. This gets more people voting than ever before. And this is going to pay off because over here, looking all the way over to modern day India, is the mighty Persian Empire. And over here is tiny little Greece. Well, the Greeks are going to send out colonists. And they are going to come over here on the west coast of the Persian Empire known as Ionia. And Athens is one of the strongest and wealthiest Greek city-states, and Persia is the dominant empire at the time. Well, as the Greeks had sailed around and colonized the Mediterranean Sea, they set up colonies over here in Ionia. The problem is they didn't ask King Darius's permission, or Darius. So he will say, you Greeks are in my land and you're not paying me any taxes. This is how we're going to handle this. Whatever you give to your mother city-state of Athens there, Athenian suburbs, you owe to me. Eventually, the colonies could not pay Athens and King Darius what he wanted. So Darius goes to destroy them. The city of Athens won't send any men to help, but they will send ships and weapons. And when Darius destroys the colonies, he's angry and he's going to come after Greece as a result. And he asks them to surrender. Most of the city-states do, except Athens, the tiny little city-state of Plataea, and Sparta. And the Spartans and the Athenians don't like each other, but the Athenians send a runner down to Sparta to ask for their help. And they say, we will help you after our big religious festival for the year is done. But we cannot leave before the festival is up. And so, King Darius will invade at the famous Battle of Marathon, about 26 miles from Athens. The Greeks, and right up here is Thermopylae, where we're going to head next. All right, here's Athens, here's Thermopylae. The Greeks, they're trying to hold off the Persians until the city is evacuated. And they have this massive battle where the mighty Greek phalanx, that triangle arrowhead-shaped battle formation, destroys the Persian army. It's an upset victory. It's so bad that King Darius abandons his men and sails home. Only a heroic cavalry charge by his son Xerxes, I just mind blanked there for a minute, saves part of the army. But the Greeks have won an upset victory, and they send their fastest runner, Phidippides, to go tell the people that they have won. Phidippides was hallucinating and staggering on the way back, so Athena sent her assistant goddess, Nike, to attach her sandals to Phidippides' feet. He makes it back to Athens and yells out, "Rejoice, we have conquered," and he dies. And he runs the world's first 26-mile marathon. So that is absolutely fantastic. So, all right, the Greeks have won, and the Spartans come marching into town. They had completed their ceremony and marched overland for 2 days, but the Athenians insult them and say, "Oh, you lugheads, we didn't really need you. All you do is train to fight, but look at you. We didn't need you, so go away." And now the Spartans are angry. King Darius will be assassinated on the way to his daughter's wedding for abandoning his men, and his son Xerxes will take over. And he's going to spend 10 years building this massive army. He has two immediate objectives. Number one is to avenge his father's loss, and number two is to secure the western borders of his empire. And so in Greece, we have a guy named Themistocles that will say, we need to build a strong navy, part merchant ship, to defend our empire. And it is fortunate because Xerxes in 480 BC is going to bring between 250 and 300,000 soldiers, and then double that in support personnel to a tiny little narrow mountain pass up here known as Thermopylae. The Athenians will swallow their pride. They will get the Spartans to help them. And here's where King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans hold off King Xerxes' army for 3 days before falling. As a result, they come from Thermopylae, and off the coast of Athens is this tiny little island, very hard to see, known as Salamis. where Themistocles and the Persian Navy will lure them into the narrow straits. The Navy ships will swing out and destroy the slower, more cheaply made ships of ancient Persia. And the Greeks have won. And this is, King Xerxes had his throne chair built on the cliff so he could watch the destruction of the Athenians, and wow, he did not bargain for that. And so this is an important moment in world history as democracy is about to be birthed. Athens was asked to be the leader of Greece, but they said, no, we're isolationists, we did our job, we're going home. And Athens will become the leader, the Persians will destroy it, and they will rebuild it once again bigger, better, and more beautiful than it was before. And after the Persian Wars, Athens is led by a guy named Pericles. And Pericles creates a direct democracy, which means that citizens took part in the running every day-to-day operation of the city. You had to participate. He will say a person that doesn't care about their city-state isn't harmless, they are useless. This is right around the time that Socrates begins to teach his students to question political leaderships. So the freest government in the world that we've seen to this point, was it perfect? By no means, but the freest government the world had ever seen is created. So, after the Persian Wars, Athens grows in wealth. They were head of what is known as the Delian League. It was a defensive alliance of member city-states here in orange that banded together, and they said if we are ever attacked by Persia again, if they attack one of us, all of us are going to jump in. And there were two ways to join. You provide ships and men to fight like Athens did, or you pay into a treasury on the tiny neutral island of Delos, which everybody else did. Well, after a while, Athens got tired of supplying all the men, so they began taking money from the treasury to rebuild their destroyed city. And the other city-states said, hey, you can't do that. Athens goes, yeah, we can. Our city was destroyed. Yours wasn't. And they're like, well, you're the one who started the whole mess. And when those other member city-states didn't join, Sparta, and like Corinth and Thebes, formed an alternative alliance known as the Peloponnesian League, as they were afraid of Athenian aggression. And in 431 BC, Sparta will declare war on Athens. And this war is going to last for nearly 30 years. And the war is going to drag on and on. It's kind of a stalemate. But Pericles makes a mistake when he orders all Athenians and their livestock inside the city. The amount of people and the amount of refuse causes a plague to break out, and it kills 1/3 of the population of Athens, including Pericles. Meanwhile, the Spartans were outside knocking on the gosh darn door. This is when Socrates will be tried and arrested for corrupting the youth. He's like, why are you idiots fighting over who's going to be the next Pericles, who you let do all the work, when the Spartans are right out there knocking on the door? The Spartans get the Persian Navy to blockade this port called the Port of Piraeus, the one area where Athens got men and equipment, food in and out of the city. And this is known as the Peloponnesian Wars. And Athens loses, and it is destroyed again by ancient Persia. They wanted to kill all the people, but the Spartans said no, out of respect for their alliedship during our wars with you guys, you can destroy the city and the big 40-foot tall golden statue of Athena, but not any of the people. Problem with this is that everybody in Greece was forced to choose. All right, it was like the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Everybody had to pick a side. During this time, Greece makes great gains in the advent of beautiful art and architecture. As Pericles had the city rebuilt, the Greeks aimed for idealistic beauty, simple yet elegant. Again, it's like the house decorated for the holidays with just a wreath and a candle in the window. Rather than, old Ed down here on New 86 or Chevy Chase in Christmas Vacation. Simple yet beautiful. The Discobolus is sculpted. All right, it is one of the ideas of ancient Greece where everybody is sculpted in their best possible light. If you're short or tall or fat or skinny, everybody is chiseled with rippling muscles. And the Discobolus, if you see the look on his face, shows the embodiment of what Athens liked, being strong of mind and sound of body. Anybody can be a brute thug, but you want to be able to plan and execute it. So their ideal guy might be Odysseus. Also, Greek drama was invented at this time. The Greeks invented the concept of the tragedy to guard against hubris, being overconfident, overlooking an opponent. And a tragedy is a story written in 3 parts, where part 1, the hero does something great and becomes a hero. Act 2, the hero gets cocky, he gets full of hubris and makes a tragic mistake. And part 3 is the tragic consequences of that mistake. The guy who started this is known as Aeschylus. He is the father of the tragedy who wrote it out in 3 parts. Sophocles is considered the greatest tragic playwright. He wrote 123 plays. Unfortunately, over 7 of which have survived. Even more unfortunately, one of the ones you guys have to read is that creepy Oedipus Rex. And my favorite is the champion of women's and slaves' rights. Remember, if Euripides pants, it's going to be a tragedy. That would be Euripides. But after a while, we got just sick and tired of these tragedies. Theseus kills the Minotaur. Look how buff and rogue Theseus is. And he forgets to take down the sail, and his dad jumps off the cliff. And so we begin to use animals like the ant getting ready for winter, while the grasshopper wants to run and play. And when winter comes, the grasshopper freezes to death while the ant lives on. But after a while, my God, we get so freaking depressed. So a guy named Aristophanes, and remember, he was Aristophanes, he begins the Saturday Night Live comedy satire making fun of different political leaders. They hated him at first, but pretty soon it was seen that if Aristophanes isn't making fun of you, you are not doing your job. Leadership by nature is divisive. You are going to make some people happy and some people angry. So he brings a little bit of humor to what's going on. Again, this is the time where Socrates and his know thyself attitude is executed. Plato goes off to find the world's perfect government. And we'll get to Aristotle in a little bit, where he says, moderation in all things, and the best government should aim to help their citizens strive to be the best person possible. So tomorrow, on voting day, make sure your parents vote, because Pericles says a man who does not vote is not just harmless, but he is useless. So, Herodotus will also come around at this time. He is known as the father of history. He writes on the history of the Persian Wars, but anything that he could not corroborate, he just kind of filled in the gaps and made stuff up himself. And he is followed by a guy named Thucydides, who is much more thorough. He writes on the Peloponnesian Wars, and if he could not find a Spartan and an Athenian who agreed, or was corroborated by a Persian, if he couldn't prove it, he didn't write it. He's much more valid and non-fictional. At this time, Aristotle will go north and he will help tutor the son of this guy, Philip of Macedon, who is a barbarian war leader. And Philip participated in the Persian Wars, and Peloponnesian Wars rather, and he was sad when he was in prison. Not only because he was in prison, but because he fell in love with the Greeks. And he was sad that they were destroying themselves, so he felt he had to conquer them in order to save their culture. So he and his young son will go about to conquer them, and they will defeat the Greeks at the Battle of Sharona in 338 BC. On the way to his daughter's wedding, just like King Darius, Philip is killed and the young Alexander is going to take over. Now, Alexander was tutored by the Aristotle, and he has an insatiable amount of curiosity. But he also wants to punish Persia for destroying Athens so many times. So he sets off to conquer Persia. And on the way, he goes down to Egypt, where he goes to an oracle and finds out that he is the descendant of the great Greek hero Hercules himself. He is a demigod. And he conquers Egypt to get a supply line. He goes over and fights King Darius III. King Darius III, they have that conversation in the desert. That's not how negotiations work. And Alexander said, who the heck said this was a negotiation? His own people will eventually murder him, and Alexander the Great will go all the way over to the Indus River Valley. His men will conquer 11,000 miles in 10 years, and they just want to go home. Knowing without their support he cannot succeed, Alexander decides that he is going to return to Baghdad and refit and rest, where he will be bit by a mosquito and he will die at the age of 33. Conquering the world's biggest empire up to that point. And Alexander's empire is divided amongst 3 of his generals. Alexander, more important than a conqueror, these are the swath of his conquests. He will create Hellenistic civilization, which is a blending of Greek, of Egyptian, of Persian, and Indian culture. Everywhere he went, he took scholars and botanists and linguists, and they brought everything that he learned back to a city he is going to found on the Egyptian coast known as Alexandria. And here he builds his famous House of Muses, a university or a museum based after the 9 Greek goddesses of learning. It had a zoo, a botanical garden, lecture halls, library, research areas. Anybody who is anybody comes to this area to study and do research. Paintings and sculptures from all over the ancient world, from Egypt to India, are housed there. Some of the guys that will study will be a guy named Aristarchus. And Aristarchus will come up with a heliocentric theory that the earth revolves around the sun. It'll be about 2,000 years before people believe in what Aristarchus has said. A guy named Eratosthenes will calculate the circumference of the earth at the equator and only be a few hundred miles off. Archimedes will come up with simple machines like the lever and the pulley to displace weight and make it easier to move heavy objects and the measurement of volume. Pythagoras will do his Pythagorean theorem. Euclid will make the step-by-step method of geometry. And Hippocrates will begin his medical school, where he will help out, try and find cures for illnesses. And he will teach anybody, men and women, as long as they take an oath to standards, ethical standards of treating patients. So the Greeks are going to give us a lot of things. They're going to give us the gifts of art and architecture, of the liberal arts curriculum, of government, of entertainment, tragedy, economy. They're going to give birth to the world's first democracy. Things that are going to influence us well into the future up to the current day. That's as fast as I can do Greece. If you have any questions, let me know next time I see you. I'm going to take a break and head to Rome.